The hall sparkled with golden lights, and laughter filled the air. The Adeyemi wedding reception was the event of the year. Rich guests in designer clothes, music playing softly, and waiters moving around with trays of food and drinks. At one corner of the hall, a young woman in plain, slightly worn clothes moved quietly from table to table, offering jollof rice and chicken to the guests. Her face looked calm, but her eyes carried sadness. A group of women at one table leaned in and whispered, "Who's she?" One of the Adeyemi aunties replied quickly, "Oh, her? That's just the maid. She helps around the house. Don't mind her." More guests looked her way, some with pity, others with mild interest. She smiled politely, keeping her eyes down as she served another plate. No one paid her much attention. At that moment, the doors of the hall opened wide. Two men in suits entered, followed by a tall, well-dressed man with an air of importance. Gasps followed. The governor of the state had arrived. Cameras flashed. The bride and groom rushed forward with their parents to greet him. But the governor didn't stop to greet them. His eyes scanned the room once, then locked onto the woman with the food tray. He took 2 strong steps forward. "Jessica," he said, loud enough to stop the music. The young woman froze. The tray shook in her hands. She looked up slowly, unsure. "Yes, sir?" A smile spread across the governor's face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, turning to the crowd, "this woman is not a maid. She is a hero. She is the founder of the Safe Haven Project, one of the strongest voices for women's rights in this state." The room went silent. A fork dropped. Someone gasped. The bride's mother clutched her chest. Her husband looked like he might faint. The guests turned from the governor to Jessica, whose eyes had gone wide. "She saved my niece's life," the governor continued. "And today I came not for the wedding, but to honor her." He stepped forward and gently took the tray from her hand. Then, with deep respect, he said, "You've done more for this country than many in power ever will." Jessica stood still, too shocked to speak. The crowd burst into applause. Her in-laws, they could barely breathe. 5 years earlier, Jessica lived in a small one-bedroom apartment with her mother. Life was not easy. Her father had died when she was just 12, and her mother worked long hours as a tailor to make ends meet. But Jessica was bright, top of her class in school, always reading, always asking questions. She dreamed of doing something meaningful with her life, something that would help others. Despite their struggles, her mother always encouraged her. "Don't let our situation define you," she would say. "You have a big heart and a sharp mind. That's your strength." After graduating from university with a degree in social work, Jessica volunteered with small local NGOs. She didn't care about the pay. She wanted to help women, especially those facing domestic abuse and poverty. That was how she first met Daniel Adeyemi. Daniel came from a very rich family. His father owned several businesses, and their name carried weight in society. He was charming, educated abroad, and unlike his siblings, he treated everyone kindly. They met at a charity outreach, where Jessica was helping organize food and clothes for struggling. Daniel was impressed by her passion and how hard she worked, even when no one was watching. Their friendship grew slowly, then turned into love. When he proposed, Jessica was surprised but happy. She didn't care about his money or background. She loved the way he listened to her and made her feel safe. Her mother was hesitant but supportive. "If he truly respects you," she said, "then go ahead. But don't let anyone dim your light." The problem started after their engagement. Daniel's parents, especially his mother, were not pleased. "She's not from our class," his mother had said. "No family name, no pedigree." They expected him to marry someone from a wealthy or powerful background. But Daniel insisted, and they finally agreed, though their hearts were never in it. From the very first day Jessica entered the Adeyemi mansion, she felt out of place. The house was cold, not just because of its marble floors and tall ceilings, but because of the people inside. The staff treated her like a guest at first, but the family made it clear she wasn't welcome. Daniel's siblings ignored her. His mother spoke to her like she was beneath them. His father hardly looked at her. Still, Jessica tried. She cooked for the family, smiled through dinners, and helped with charity events. But nothing she did was ever enough. They called her that girl behind her back. If she spoke up about something, they told her to stay quiet. "You're lucky we allowed this marriage," his mother once whispered. "Don't forget your place." Daniel, though kind at first, slowly changed. He stopped standing up for her. He would say, "Just ignore them, Jess. Don't let it get to you." Over time, he spent more hours at work and less time listening to her. She felt more alone than ever. But Jessica never lost her sense of purpose. She continued working with women's groups in secret. She used her allowance to buy supplies for shelters and even started mentoring young girls in her free time. One of the small projects she joined was run in partnership with a local government office. That's when she met Governor Adeyemi. Back then, he was not yet the governor. He was a commissioner visiting local projects. Jessica stood out in the crowd. While most people tried to impress him with big words and polished speeches, Jessica simply spoke from the heart. She explained how the women they were helping needed more than just handouts. They needed safety, education, and hope. After the event, he came up to her. "You're very brave," he said. "We need more people like you in this country." They kept in touch. He invited her to more community meetings, and she gave advice on how to reach women in hard places. Nothing big or flashy, just quiet work behind the scenes. She never told the Adeyemis. She knew they wouldn't understand. Back at home, things grew worse. Jessica wasn't allowed to sit with the family at formal dinners anymore. Her opinions were dismissed, and her husband stopped noticing when she was upset. His mother would make remarks like, "In our home, we value class," while looking straight at her. When guests came to visit, Jessica was asked to stay in her room, or worse, to help serve the guests as if she were a helper. They didn't introduce her as Daniel's wife. They just said she was part of the household staff. At first, she cried in private. Then, slowly, she stopped crying. She began writing down her experiences, trying to make sense of her pain. Though life in the mansion was suffocating, outside those walls, she still made a difference. One of the women she helped had once said, "You saved me. You don't even know it, but you did." That kept her going. Jessica knew she was losing her marriage, but she was finding something else, her voice. She didn't need riches to feel worthy. She needed to remember. Jessica continued her work quietly. Whenever she had a little time, she visited shelters and helped women going through abuse. She used her own money to buy food, clothes, and even pay for hospital bills when needed. She never told anyone in the Adeyemi house. They would never understand. They believed women like that brought shame to their families. Jessica knew better. She had seen their pain. She had seen their strength. Helping them gave her a reason to keep going. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. One afternoon, while she was out visiting a shelter, her mother-in-law sent someone to her room to look for her. They found a notebook filled with names, stories, and donation records. When Jessica returned home, she found the entire family waiting for her in the living room. Her mother-in-law threw the notebook on the table. "What is this nonsense?" Jessica tried to explain. "I help women who are in danger. I give them food and—" "You are an Adeyemi now," her father-in-law shouted. "You cannot be walking around dirty places and helping useless people. What if the press finds out? Is it wrong to help people in need?" Jessica asked softly. Her mother-in-law's voice was cold. "It is wrong to shame this family." Jessica looked at Daniel, hoping he would speak for her. He sat quietly, eyes on the floor. He said nothing. That silence hurt more than the shouting. "You think you're better than us because you want to play charity worker?" her sister-in-law added. "You married into this family. Your job is to behave, not to act like some saint." That night, Jessica cried in her room. She didn't cry because of the harsh words. She cried because she finally saw that she was alone. The next day, her mother-in-law gave new instructions to the house staff. Jessica was no longer to be treated like the madam of the house. She would eat separately. She would do chores. She would not attend family meetings or events. Slowly, the other staff started treating her differently too. They were kind, but they followed orders. At first, Jessica resisted. She tried to speak to Daniel again. "Why are you letting them treat me like this?" He looked tired. "Just do what they say, Jess. It's not worth the fight." "But I'm your wife," she said, her voice breaking. He didn't answer. From that day, Jessica was no longer a wife in her own home. She became the silent shadow in the background. When guests came over, she was told to help with the serving. If anyone asked who she was, someone in the family would quickly say, "Oh, that's just the maid helping out. She's been with us for a while." Jessica would lower her eyes and pretend she didn't hear. Inside, her heart burned, but she didn't show it. People began to treat her the way her in-laws did. Guests ignored her. Some smiled out of pity. The staff stopped asking her for help with decisions. She had become invisible. But even then, Jessica didn't stop helping the women who needed her. If anything, their pain reminded her she was not alone. Many of them had lost everything too, but they still fought to survive. So she kept going, one visit at a time, one small act of kindness after another. No one knew that something was already changing. One of the women she had helped, a young lady named Lara, was about to change everything. But Jessica had no idea yet. She just knew she had to keep moving, even when the world tried to push her down. Jessica woke up every day feeling smaller. The mansion was big and beautiful, but she felt like a prisoner in it. She moved around quietly, cleaned dishes, served food, and tried not to make eye contact. The same people who once called her madam now barely noticed her. Sometimes she wondered if she had lost herself. Was she really just a maid now? Was this all her life would ever be? She started writing again, not just to escape, but to remember. In an old notebook, she wrote down everything she saw and felt. Not just about herself, but also about the women she helped. Stories of pain, survival, and strength. Some were young girls, some older women. Many had been beaten, insulted, or thrown out by their families. But they were still fighting. That gave her courage. One afternoon at the women's shelter, a new woman arrived. She was quiet, her clothes torn, and her eyes filled with fear. Her name was Lara. Jessica welcomed her gently and gave her something to eat. Over the next few weeks, Jessica listened to Lara's story. She had run away from an abusive boyfriend who had threatened to kill her. She had tried to go back to her family, but they turned her away. Jessica stayed by her side, helping her find safety and peace. She brought her clothes, books, and even helped her get back to school. Slowly, Lara started smiling again. One day, Lara said, "You saved me. I thought my life was over, but you gave me hope. No one's ever done that for me before." Jessica smiled softly. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you how strong you are." What Jessica didn't know was that Lara had a secret too. She was the niece of Governor Adeyemi. Her parents had sent her to live with her uncle after the trouble. The governor had tried to help, but Lara refused to talk to anyone. It was only after meeting Jessica that she opened up. When Lara told her uncle about Jessica, he was surprised. "Jessica Adeyemi?" he asked. "The same woman from the Safe Haven Project?" Lara nodded. "She didn't even know who I was. She treated me like a human being when no one else did." The governor was moved. He made a few calls and confirmed it was indeed the same Jessica he had met years ago at a local outreach. He asked Lara to invite Jessica to a private event honoring people who made a difference in the lives of women. Back at the mansion, Jessica said nothing about the invitation. She hid the letter inside a book. If her in-laws found out, they would call it attention-seeking. Her husband would probably ignore it, so she kept quiet. As the event day got closer, something worse happened. Jessica's mother fell seriously ill. She collapsed one morning in their small home. A neighbor helped rush her to a nearby clinic, but they didn't have the equipment to treat her properly. Jessica ran there the moment she heard. Her heart pounded as she held her mother's hand. "Please stay with me, Mama," she whispered. The doctor told her her mother needed surgery, and soon. Jessica didn't have that kind of money. She went back to the mansion and waited for Daniel to come home. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking. When he walked in, she stood quickly. "Daniel, please. My mother is very sick. She needs urgent surgery. I can't do this alone. I need your help," she said, tears filling her eyes. Daniel looked at her and sighed. "Jess, I can't just take money from my parents without explaining why. You know how they are." "Then explain," she said. "Tell them it's for my mother. Please, Daniel." He shook his head. "They won't agree. And I don't want another fight. Can't you ask someone else?" Jessica stared at him, her mouth slightly open. "You mean you won't help?" "I'm sorry," he said, walking away. "It's too complicated." That night, Jessica lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her world felt like it was falling apart. Her mother could die. Her husband didn't care. Her in-laws still treated her like she was nothing. She got up and opened her notebook. She flipped through the pages, reading her own words, her pain, her victories, the women she had helped. One page caught her eye. It was something she had written a few months ago. "Even when they silence you, your actions speak louder." The next morning, Jessica made a decision. She would go to the event. She would not tell anyone. She would stand in that room and speak her truth, not for herself, but for every woman who had been treated like she didn't matter. The day arrived. She wore a simple dress and fixed her hair in a neat bun. No makeup, no jewelry. Just herself. She told the family she was running an errand. No one paid her much attention. At the event, she was welcomed with respect. Lara hugged her tightly and introduced her to others. Jessica looked around the room filled with government officials, social workers, and survivors. She felt small, but not invisible. When it was her turn to speak, she walked to the stage, holding the mic with steady hand. "I'm not a politician. I'm not rich. I'm just a woman who believes no one should suffer in silence." She spoke about pain, healing, and the power of listening. She didn't name her in-laws. She didn't share her personal hurt, but her words carried years of hidden strength. The room was quiet when she finished. Then the applause came. The governor stepped forward, shook her hand, and said, "You are a voice for the voiceless. Never stop." As Jessica left the building that day, she didn't know what would happen, but something inside her had shifted. She was no longer afraid of being small. She had remembered who she was, and soon the world would too. The wedding hall was decorated like a palace. Golden lights hung from the ceiling, soft music played in the background, and the smell of perfume and expensive food filled the air. Guests laughed, danced, and posed for photos. It was the wedding of one of the Adeyemi daughters, and the family had spared no cost to make it grand. Inside the kitchen, Jessica stood quietly, holding a tray of small meat pies. She wore a simple gown and flat shoes, no makeup, no jewelry. Her hair was tied back neatly. She had asked to stay out of sight, but her mother-in-law insisted she help with something useful. So, Jessica was ordered to serve food to the guests like the rest of the staff. "Just walk around and smile," her mother-in-law said with a cold smile. "You want to be helpful, right?" Jessica said nothing. She simply nodded and picked up the tray. She moved from table to table, offering the meat pies. Some guests ignored her. Some smiled politely. A few whispered, "Isn't that Daniel's wife?" But were quickly corrected by someone nearby. No, she's just the maid. Don't worry about her." Jessica heard everything. She kept her head down and kept walking. The bride and groom sat at the center table, surrounded by family. Daniel sat beside them, clapping and laughing with his sibling. He hadn't spoken to Jessica once that day. Not even a glance. Then the hall doors opened. A hush fell over the crowd as several men in black suits entered. Behind them, dressed in a navy blue agbada with gold embroidery, stood Governor Adeyemi. Gasps filled the room. People jumped to their feet. Cameras clicked. The MC grabbed the mic and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, the governor of the state has honored us with his presence." The Adeyemi family rushed to the front to greet him. The bride's father, sweating with excitement, bowed slightly and stretched out his hand. "Your Excellency, welcome. We are honored." But the governor didn't look at him. His eyes scanned the hall quickly. Then they stopped. He took a slow step forward, pointing toward the far corner. "Jessica?" Jessica turned sharply, nearly dropping the tray. The entire hall turned with him. All eyes now on her. The governor walked straight across the floor, past the VIP tables, past the confused groom and bride, and stopped in front of her. He smiled gently. "I thought I recognized you. You didn't tell me you'd be here." Jessica opened her mouth but said nothing. Her hands were shaking. He turned to the crowd. "Everyone, please. May I have your attention?" The music stopped. Even the MC stood frozen. "I did not come here for a wedding," the governor said clearly. "I came for one reason. To honor a woman who has quietly saved more lives than many of us with power ever have." Murmurs spread through the hall. He looked at Jessica again. This woman, Jessica Adeyemi, is the founder of the Safe Haven Project. Through her work, abused women have found protection, support, and a second chance at life. Gasps echoed across the room. 2 months ago, the governor continued, my niece was one of those women. Jessica didn't know who she was. She helped her like she helps every other woman, with kindness, strength, and no desire for recognition. Now the room was completely silent. "I came today to present her with the State Human Rights Medal," he said, pulling out a small box. "She didn't respond to our invitation, but I had a feeling I'd find her." He opened the box and took out a shining medal. The bride's mother clutched her husband's arm, her eyes wide with shock. Daniel looked down at his hands, face pale. The siblings stared at Jessica like they were seeing her for the first time. The governor turned to her again. "Jessica, please. Come stand with me." Jessica stood frozen for a moment, then slowly placed the tray on the nearest table and walked toward him. He placed the medal around her neck and raised her hand high in the air. Applause broke out. At first, just a few claps. Then more. Then the entire hall was clapping and cheering. Some stood. Some had tears in their eyes. Cameras flashed again, this time all on her. Jessica blinked back her own tears. Her heart beat loudly in her chest. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. The governor leaned in and whispered, "You deserve this. Never let them silence you again." She nodded, swallowing her emotions. When she turned around, she saw her in-laws' faces, shocked, embarrassed, broken. Daniel's lips trembled, but he said nothing. His mother looked like she might faint. Jessica didn't look away. She walked back through the hall, but this time she walked tall. Not as a maid. Not as someone's shame, but as someone the whole world had finally seen. The morning after the wedding, Jessica stood in the same room where she had spent years feeling like a stranger. The sunlight streamed through the window, but the house felt colder than ever. She packed her small suitcase quietly. There wasn't much to take, just a few clothes, her notebook, and a picture of her mother. Everything else had never really been hers. As she zipped the bag, Daniel finally spoke. "Jessica, what are you doing?" She looked at him calmly. "I'm leaving." He frowned as if confused. "Leaving? Because of yesterday?" "Jess, you're overreacting." Jessica turned to face him. "Overreacting? You let your family treat me like dirt for years. You stood by and said nothing when they called me a maid in my own home. And when my mother was sick, you refused to help." Her voice was steady, not angry, just final. "I've had enough, Daniel. I'm done." He stepped forward, panic flashing in his eyes. "Jess, don't do this. I'll talk to them. Things can change." She shook her head slowly. "No, Daniel. I've changed. And I'm not going back to the woman who begged for love and respect in this house. I deserve better." Without waiting for his reply, Jessica picked up her bag and walked out. The servants watched from a distance, some with tears in their eyes. They had seen how much she had suffered. Now they saw her leaving free. Outside, a black car waited. It wasn't a taxi. It was sent by the governor's office. Lara sat inside, waving at Jessica with a big smile. "Ready to start your new life?" she asked as Jessica climbed in. Jessica smiled for the first time in years. "Yes, more than ready." Over the next few weeks, things changed quickly. The governor personally met with Jessica and offered full support to expand her work. With government funding and donations pouring in after her story went public, Jessica opened a new women's shelter called Safe Haven House, a bigger, safer place for victims of abuse to rebuild their lives. News outlets shared her story everywhere. Pictures of her receiving the medal went viral on social media. People called her a hero, a voice for the voiceless. Many women reached out to thank her, saying her courage gave them hope. One afternoon, as Jessica supervised the painting of the new shelter's walls, Daniel showed up. He looked tired and broken. "Jess," he said softly, "please come home. I miss you. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." Jessica looked at him, her heart calm this time. "Home? That house was never my home, Daniel. I begged you for years to stand by me, and you chose silence. Now I choose myself." He opened his mouth to speak, but Jessica stopped him gently. "I forgive you, but I'm not coming back. I found where I belong, and it's not with you anymore." Daniel lowered his head, tears in his eyes, and walked away. Jessica turned back to the shelter, where women and children were arriving, some scared, some hopeful. She welcomed them with open arms, remembering how lost she once felt and how far she had come. This time, no one could take away her dignity. No one could silence her voice. She was no longer